Where would you find yourself, your ego? Now we get to spend a couple lessons and exercises really focusing on our search for where we take ourselves to be. To figure out how and where to search, I feel like I need to spend some time pointing out some basic characteristics of our first-person experience. This is so that we're all on the same page. So put your earbuds in, put down your phone, and look out the window at something in your visual field. Before we get started on this exercise, I wanted to throw out a couple suggestions that were correlated with my progress towards non-dual awareness. I do want to be clear. I cannot make any claim that any of these caused my progression. There might only be correlation involved, but if you're interested in trying some of these, be my guest. Number 1, I am an early riser, and the bulk of my learning and practice was initially in the morning. I did find recognizing new insights more difficult later in the day. Number 2, I use earbuds, and for some reason, I don't think that's insignificant, as it really creates an intimate experience, but also allows sounds to be recognized. Number 3, I not only listen to lessons while sitting on a couch, but also I listen to them while working out and while walking through the neighborhood and even on trails. I feel that zone 1 or 2 out of the 5 cardio zones is conducive to relaxing my mind, decreasing the number of distracting thoughts. Number 4, I found that my progress accelerated during Saturday mornings. I used to be the guy white-knuckling it to Friday night, so I could binge on Netflix, have a few cocktails, eat a lot of garbage food, and then sleep in on Saturday mornings, regretting how my Friday self threw me under the bus. In some sick way, that Friday night habit was somehow my reward for the week. Man, did I have it wrong. Now, I go to bed at the same time Friday night as other nights. I get up at my normal early time, and I found the peace and calm of Saturday and also Sunday mornings to be some of the best hours of the week to put in the time to explore the first-person experience. There's something about being up before the rest of the world that's been quite helpful for me. Number 5, I typically look out the window with a forward gaze, resting my attention on something in nature. For some reason, I think this was critical for me. I personally don't have the same ability to rest the conceptual mind when I'm looking at something like a coffee cup a few feet away on my coffee table. So anyways, I know that was a bit of an aside, but thought I'd throw out some suggestions for anyone interested. All right, let's come back to an exercise exploring where to look for you, the so-called self or ego. The reason for this exercise and why it should not be skipped over is that if you don't understand where to look for you, 2 problems will come up. Number 1, you will make an incorrect assumption that we are looking for answers like in your head or sitting in this room. You might point to your chest, etc. when asked to look for you. Without a basic lesson, you might completely miss the point and the target zone of that interrogation. Number 2, by not having a basic understanding of where you should be looking for your ego, yourself, the central subject, you will not be equipped with the knowledge necessary to then inspect that claim directly. So, this is important, and let's get started. I do hope you get a lot out of this exercise, as it can help you better understand how I see the world from the first person, and it can start bringing you up to speed. I want to be clear, this exercise is not meant to get you to a non-dual flow state, but it is so valuable, I cannot overstate its importance. So I'm sitting on a couch, just looking outside through a window at a tree. It doesn't matter what I'm looking at, but like I said, gazing out at nature, I felt was correlated with my progress. So here's a simple starting question. Where do you take yourself to be right now? Where would you find yourself? Simple question, right? And initially, might even present itself as a fairly uninteresting question, but we have to start somewhere. I'm going to guess that some answers that might have arose were similar to, I'm sitting in a room on a couch, or I'm sitting on a park bench, or some might even say, I feel like I'm in my head. If any of these answers popped up, that's great. That can at least establish that you were listening and participating, and not already lost in thought, thinking about something completely unrelated. I'm going to start with those answers, and then we're going to really sharpen our search area for the rest of this exercise. Let's start by looking at our feet. Look down and wiggle your toes. Now, look at your hands. Wiggle your fingers. From a first-person standpoint, are you, your hands, or feet in this moment? I get that might initially seem like a funny question, as many would answer, of course, I'm my hands and feet. They're part of my body. Or, of course, they're me. No worries if that is intuitive to you, but we're going to start getting specific, very specific, in our search for where the ego would be found. Follow me here. Let's again focus our gaze on something outside the window, centrally located in the visual scene. Let me ask you to do this. As you look at the object, wiggle your toes. Move your fingers. If you were involved in a terrible accident that resulted in an amputated foot or hand, would you still be here looking at this object? Sorry for the gruesome thought, but there is a reason for this question. We have to remember, in some sense, you're here doing this exercise as you are on a spiritual quest. In some sense, some people might even say, we're looking for our soul. I think the answer to the question would be, of course, I would still be here. If you agree with that response, great, let's keep moving forward. Possibly, we can agree right now that although hands and feet are part of our body, what makes us us is something completely different. We would expect to still be here in the absence of a hand or a foot. The thing that makes us us is different. It's more central and completely distinct from just a hand or a foot. Now look down at your knees. Where do you take yourself to be? Where would you expect to find the subject that is recognizing experience right now? Is it in your knee? Is it elsewhere? If you answered with a response that you would expect to find yourself in a place more approximating your head, and that is where you are commandeering experience, fantastic. We are starting to really sharpen where we take ourselves to be. If you can notice that your knees are on the receiving end of where you would expect to be found, that they're over there and you would expect to be found more over here, and that you are looking across a couple feet of space to where they are, then we're starting to track together. Again, not earth-shattering, right? But this is more important than you might initially think. In some way, you're finding that what makes you, you, is less and less about your body, and more about something that is experiencing or recognizing this body in front of you right now. You are starting to loosen your intuition of where you are in this moment is in any way dependent on the body that you see when you look down. Okay, hard stop. A lot of you just threw up your hands and said, really? You really expect to survive a few seconds without your heart, lungs, etc.? I think this is where there is so much confusion occurring with this endeavor. Right now, you have to make the choice if you are even interested in proceeding, because I get it. From a third-person standpoint, you need the sum of your body and organs to sustain a brain, blood flow, oxygen, etc. If, however, you are interested in pursuing the so-called awakened mind, you can still acknowledge those facts, but we are interested in what the conscious experience is right now. We have to interrogate what it's like from the first person. Case in point, from the first person, is there any evidence that there is a brain involved in what you are seeing outside? Any evidence at all? If we are still thinking that our body is us in this moment, where we would expect to find what's experiencing this moment, we haven't sharpened our search. We are stuck in a third-person conceptual framework of course, I need a heart, lungs, etc. to be alive right now. Again, although I agree with that third-person framing of existence, those claims are completely unsubstantiated when evaluating our experience from the first person. If you want to continue, let's look out the window, rest our gaze on the object, and let's inspect further where we take ourselves to be. Let's create an imaginary line from a point starting on the object, and let's have the imaginary line end exactly where you are, the one observing the object, the place where you would expect to find you, the central self of experience, in this moment. Does this make sense? I think that we can all agree that the imaginary line would not be extending from the object to our right hand, or our left foot, or our knee, or even our chest. Where does your imaginary line extend to? Where would you expect to find the subject looking at the object? Is it in a place approximating your head? Is it somewhere behind your eyes? Keep looking at the object. Be as precise as possible. Let's try one more thing before we wrap this up, because again, this is really important. We cannot inspect something if we don't know where to find it. Take your hand and point at the object that you're looking at. Put your hand that's pointing at the object between you and the object, like if you were trying to point the object out to yourself. Now, take the pointer finger and point it at you, where you would expect to find yourself. Not at your chest, but what is observing the object. Is your finger pointing in a direction that somewhat approximates behind your eyes? Is your finger actually pointing in the middle of the oval visual field? Now point your finger at an ear, either ear. Does it appear that the finger is not pointing at you anymore? Do you have to move the finger back to the middle of the visual field to more precisely point where you are? Point your finger back at where you take yourself to be, the central observer. Is there a moment where the finger's direction pinpoints where you are? Maybe you even felt some sort of an emotion, like tightness in the chest, when the direction of the finger landed on the exact location, like you found where you're at. You can put your hand down now and look out the window one more time, noticing what it's like to know where you are from the first person, looking at the object. Let's wrap this up. I hope you found this helpful. When we start to inspect where we should find the self, the central subject, the ego, we cannot still be hung up on third-person concepts. They really are unhelpful in this endeavor. Don't worry, you're not going to lose third-person concepts going forward, short of a lobotomy. But you will need to sharpen your understanding of the first-person experience to make progress. Think to yourself, if you were to transfer your consciousness, what part would move? For me, it makes sense that I could, theoretically, move all of my consciousness elsewhere and leave this body behind. My conscious experience is so much different than the body that I see when I look down. This week, try this. As you're sitting on the couch, just take a moment to draw an imaginary line from an object to where you are, where you would expect to find the subject that's actually looking at the object. That's going to be our next exercise. We will actually start the search party to find the self. But before the next exercise, I think it would be best to insert a couple conceptual lessons, so don't miss out on those.